Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very honored to be speaking. So my presentation is going to be called Connections, Community, and Communication. So I'm going to be talking about all three aspects and how they're kind of intertwined and related together. So this is just like a kind of a brief overview. So it's going to just be a discussion talking about developing and fostering a healthy relationship with those with disabilities and those around us in order to create a connected community through faith and communication. I'll just skip this. So kind of here's the agenda for what we're going to be talking about today. So of course, I'm going to talk about connections and what does it mean to make connections with others. Community, how can you create and foster a community with those around you? Communication, and establishing healthy communication between yourself and others. And then lastly, kind of tying it all together and how establishing healthy communication can create inclusive connections within a community. So first off, I just want to talk about what does connection mean. So a connection is a relationship where a person, thing, or idea is linked or associated with something or something else. And the thing with connections is that they can have a very heavy effect on the feelings and emotions of people. So if they have a very strong and positive connection, then that can lead to positive feelings and emotions such as happiness, a sense of community, and also improve the well-being of those involved. On the other hand, if you have a weak connection, that can also lead to negative feelings and emotions such as stress and feelings of isolation. So how can you know if you've established a genuine connection? So I kind of pinpointed down to 6 main things, which is going to be mutual respect. So there's a strong respect of each other's boundaries and each other's opinions. Having open communication, which means both parties feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings without that fear or judgment. There's going to be support. So each party involved is going to be genuine in that they want the best for what's the best for each other and offer help when it's needed. There's also going to be that sense of safety. So again, both sides are willing to be vulnerable in what they say and share deeper aspects of themselves, including their thoughts and feelings. There's going to be those positive feelings. So as long as there is a really strong positive connection, then those positive feelings of safety, the positive feelings of belonging somewhere, and also wanting to create deeper and more connections is also going to occur. And there's also going to be consistency and care. So once a connection is established, then ideally it's going to be maintained over time. So once you make a connection with someone, it's not just a one and done kind of deal. You want to keep establishing, strengthening that connection because relationships are going to evolve over time. You're going to know them more. And so we want to make sure that when the connection is made, there is that consistency and that genuine care. So all of these aspects can start the beginnings of a connection, but they're just kind of the starter. You want to make sure that all of it's also very genuine and it comes from your heart, because again, it's going to develop and it can't develop much further if it's just a very surface level sense of feeling. And these connections, these genuine and strong connections are what's going to create a stronger community within the church and also with those around you. So then moving on to community, we're going to talk about how you can create and foster a community with those around you. So what does community mean? So it can kind of have 2 definitions, one being a group of people living in the same space or having a particular characteristic in common, but can also be a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of having similar interests or similar goals. So what are some aspects of a strong community? A strong community is going to have trust, it's going to have inclusivity, it's going to have collaboration, but also communication. So when we're talking about trust, like we said before, there's going to be that sense of trust where you feel like you can be very vulnerable and what you say to them is going to matter to them. And that they're going to care about what you have to say rather than just listening to you and just like, oh, okay, that's great to know. But they're going to really care if you have a concern. There's going to be, with the inclusivity, not only acceptance, but diversity in who is in the community and also supportiveness of who's in the community as well. In terms of collaboration, there's going to be a lot of exchanges, not only with communication, but maybe in how programs are being made, how relationships are being made, how fellowship is done before or after any like worship time, the sermons that are held, because that's when fellowship is going to happen. That's when relationships and connections can actually be made, is really before and after the message that a pastor may have ready for us that day. And there's also going to be the purposeful communication. So you're talking to someone because you want to get to know them better. You're talking to them because you care, rather than it just being a job or something that you're expected to do within the church or for certain people within the community. Now, the flip side, if you didn't have a strong community, there would be that low sense of trust where you're not comfortable being yourself. You're not comfortable talking about things that are genuinely worrying for you. There's going to be that low acceptance. Maybe this community just isn't accepting of who you are. There's going to be that sense and that fear of judgment. There's a lower diversity or willing to engage with those that are different than yourself, whether it's with gender, race, ability, socioeconomic class, anything that could differentiate yourself from others, then that's going to be another barrier that's present. There's also going to be less communication because, again, less trust, and you're not going to want to talk with someone if you feel like they don't care about you. And a lot of times with people with disabilities or those families of disabilities, they feel that they cannot be very genuine in what they say because they don't feel like maybe they would be accepted or that the other people will be understanding of what their situation is. So we want to make sure that we're kind of fostering these aspects within the community, within the church, or even just community in general, so that more people are willing to be engaged in this community to create and make them stronger and also bigger and better for everyone. Okay, so there are many reasons why having a community matters, and one of them is that it can help to provide support and advocacy. So communities can help individuals navigate challenges in accessibility, information, and resources. So if you're able to find a community, it's a really great place to find resources that can help you in multiple ways, whether it's emotional, physical, financial, mental. A community is a really great place for that, and even for social means as well. But it can also provide advocacy for those individuals. Oftentimes we're present for advocacy, I find with the people I've worked with and families I've worked with, it's very intimidating to do it by yourself. A lot of times they don't know where to start, they don't know how to start talking about it because one, it can be uncomfortable, two, they don't know just how to start with everything because there are so many aspects. So having an accepting community can provide them with those resources and support of saying, hey, we can help you. We know where to start because we've done this before. We genuinely care about how you feel, so let us help you advocate for your child, for your sister, for your mother, for your cousin, and how we can help you also as a family member advocate as well, because they're affected by like everything as well. And so also having a community helps with awareness and education. So having a strong and proactive community can make it easier to spread and increase awareness and education to other people. I will say that for me, I didn't really know anything about people with disabilities probably until I was in college. I was very ignorant, very naive in what I was exposed to. And so growing up, when I saw these people with differences, I was like, oh, why are they like that? Why is he making this noise? Why doesn't he just get the school stuff like I do? Like, I don't get it. It's not that hard. Which is very ignorant of me to think back then. But again, it was because I was ignorant and I didn't know. But nowadays, because there's more awareness, more individuals are getting diagnoses that they need, they're getting the support that they need. And just like that, we want to make sure that we can educate people who don't know, whether they're young, whether they're old. It doesn't matter. There can always be awareness and education that can be done. Kind of like before, it gives us access to resources, and it's important for us to not only provide, but also to help those individuals to get that access to resources, whether it's education, so kind of like in the school setting where I'm kind of in, is what are the resources and accommodations they can get in the schools. A lot of times parents, especially if it's their first kid, having a kid in general is hard enough, and then having to add on any special needs can make it even more daunting, because a lot of times some schools are not very open about educating parents about what they can get in the schools. So again, what can they do in order to access their academic curriculum? Because if those kids have goals and aspirations, we want to get them there. We don't want to bar them or stop them from becoming who they are meant to be just because of being scared of like, oh, we don't want to change the curriculum just for one person. Again, that doesn't really matter. We want to help everyone get to where they would like to be. It can be personal, so again, sharing knowledge, making those personal social connections with other people and providing that sense of belonging. It could also be done in the professional world. So any work accommodations that could be helpful for these people, not marginalizing individuals with disabilities and differences, and being accepting and knowing that they have so much knowledge to share with the community. And also for social connections, they provide opportunities to create and build friendships and connections with those around us. So like I said, having strong connections, whether it's social or emotional, are one of the building blocks of a very strong community. And so they can help and facilitate those strong connections and also create friendships that can last a really long time. And it's also a great way for people to find other like-minded individuals where maybe they have the same interests as you, but you would have never known had you not asked or had they not been invited to join you in the community. I know a lot of churches have those interest groups or small groups for families like outside of church to go to, but if these people are not invited, then how would you know how great they are or what they can bring to the table and make those connections as well? And lastly, they bring that sense of belonging. Humans being various social creatures, we kind of do crave having a community, having somewhere to belong to. And so that's why having a community really matters. I know it's been mentioned before, but being alone and being isolated or feeling like you're alone or isolated because of many reasons that can include maybe you think they don't accept you, they don't care about your thoughts and feelings. It does take a toll on you in many different ways. And that's why having a community is so important, to provide that sense of belonging so that they don't feel isolated, they don't feel alone, or they know that there is someone, a group there that can be there to support them. So as this kind of summarizing also like the effect a community can have on the individual, so providing safety, providing support in multiple ways, providing that sense of belonging, but also a place of learning, because again, you can learn so much from these individuals, they have so much to offer. We just have to give them the equal opportunity that we would give anyone else. However, on the flip side, I also want to emphasize that you as an individual can also have, either you or the people with disabilities, they can have a really big effect on the community as well. Communities are not stagnant things, they are constantly growing, they are constantly changing, which can be a frightening thing, but also it's a very good thing because we have to adapt to the different needs of the people involved. And so that can be part of seen as active participation in the community, whether you're actively participating in what's provided, having those individuals actively participate in events or any social gatherings that are in the community. Again, advocating for access and support, which can manifest itself in many different ways, whether it's for physical disabilities, any communication disabilities. We talked a lot about the hearing and the vision, all those things we want to make sure we're advocating for equal access and support. Voicing concerns, because again, as an individual, it can be scary to do something by yourself, but again, you want to voice those concerns if you feel like there is something that needs to be improved on for either yourself or someone else. We want to make sure that we can do that as well. And also sharing knowledge with others. You can educate your community to be better, whether it's your neighborhood, your church, your school. There's always a place to learn to make it better for everyone involved. And now we're going to start talking more about communication. So this is something that is like a really big part of like my profession. Again, as a speech therapist, we emphasize a lot of things about communication. So starting off with what does communication mean? So communication is the exchange of information or news between people or groups. And so how do we communicate or exchange this information? We have either verbal communication, which is when we communicate with our words, and there's also nonverbal communication, means we are communicating without our words. So that can come up as gestures, sign language, the way we look at our eye gaze, our eye contact, technology like texting, email, your body language, behaviors, and facial expressions. And, like we heard on day one of the most important things I always tell to my clients and my families is that all behavior is a form of communication. Just because they didn't verbalize it doesn't mean that they don't have their thoughts and their feelings of their own. They could be overstimulated, they don't know how to put it in words. And even for us more neurotypical individuals, I'm sure there's times when you've just been so angry, so confused, so happy that you can't put it into words, but it shows on your face. You can either cry tears of happiness, you could be balling up your fist. Those are all nonverbal ways that you're expressing how you feel, even though you can't find the words to do so. And so another thing to keep in mind is that communication is a bridge. It's the exchange of information between point A and point B, and it can manifest itself in many ways, but communication is supposed to be a bridge between individuals, groups, and communities. And the thing about communication is that it is not a one-way road. It cannot be between me, like it would be just a lecture, like right now, if I'm the only one talking to you, but I'm not going to accept what you have to say. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, I don't really want to hear what the other party has to say to me. But in order for it to be healthy communication, there has to be back and forth where both parties are involved, both parties are offering up their expertise, their knowledge, their thoughts and opinions into that exchange of information. So what does healthy communication look like? There's a lot of different things that it can pop out as, and one of them is active listening. You're not just listening to the person, but you're making that conscious effort to listen and making sure that you understand what they're saying and the other person feels like they're being heard. There's nothing more frustrating than you saying something and the person just goes, huh? What'd you say? I wasn't really paying attention. And then that makes you feel like, well, I don't want to say it again. And that happens a lot with some of the individuals I worked with where they've told me like, well, I tried to say something and it just seemed like they didn't care or they didn't get what I was saying. And it is very hard on them and for me to hear that from them as well. There's also having empathy. So have kindness and compassion and recognize that everyone has their unique background, needs, and perspectives. And this goes for anyone really, whether it's an individual with a disability or their families, because unless you are someone with a disability or you're a family member of someone with a disability, you can't truly know exactly what they're going through. And that's okay. You don't have to know exactly what they're going through, but be there as an ally, as an advocate to help and support them in any way that you can. I also want to make a quick note that this shouldn't be confused with sympathy, which is when you feel sorrow or pity for another person's misfortune. Having a disability or having a difference is not a misfortune. It is not bad that they're different. They're just different, and that's okay. Because again, God made us all in His image, and when He says all, He means everybody included. So just want to keep that in mind that although empathy and sympathy can kind of go hand in hand, they're not the same thing. Also having accessible communication. So nowadays people are becoming more aware of like how can we have people more have accessible communication, and it was kind of mentioned before, but are we being conscious of people who are hard of hearing, who have vision barriers, who have language barriers, or anything like that? Like how are we helping them access what is being said either at the church in the sermons or even out and about in real life? Having patience and inclusivity, so creating the environment where everyone feels safe and everyone feels included. And so they should always feel that what they want and have to say matters, and that they feel like they can voice their opinions no matter what. Having constructive feedback. Not everyone's going to agree with you, no matter what your background is, not everyone will agree with you. But how can you support a communication environment where you're willing to learn? being open to being corrected and educated by others. Like even for me, even though I am a speech therapist, there's so much for me to learn about people with disabilities. There's always going to be something for me to learn within my field, but I'm not going to be stubborn and say, no, this is how I learned it in school, this is how it's going to be forever. That is never the case, and that's never going to be the case within our communities, within our churches, within our relationships, is that they have to keep changing in order to benefit everyone involved. And also respecting boundaries. Again, you're not going to know everything, nor should you assume or impose your thoughts and feelings onto others. If you want to help them, that's great, but also consider what that individual would need. It can almost be like a toxic positivity mindset where you want to help everybody, which is great. But if you're building programs and you're building relationships and you're trying to implement things without asking the people with disabilities what would benefit them, then at that point, you're no longer making it for them, you're making it for you. For your own thoughts of like your own ego and your pride thinking, well, I'm doing such a great job, I'm doing all these big things, but it has to be for them. So they have to be involved in that conversation of how can we make it better for, again, like people with wheelchairs, what would be best? People with communication disorders, how can we lower that barrier and those difficulties to make it more accessible for everybody? And so another thing to think about is like equity versus equality. So equality is when you give everyone the same thing, but equity is when you give everyone what they need. So not everyone can or will communicate the same as you. And so you have to keep that in mind of what different supports and what different accommodations do each of these people need. So that's a little thing that you see often. I've seen so many times in my classes of this little thing, like very fitting with the baseball game and everything. But we have these three people wanting to see the game, but they have different heights. So it's great you're giving everyone a box. But two people are doing great with it, one person is not benefiting from that amount of support. Versus the equity side where, you're still giving everyone exactly what they need so they can access seeing the game. We talk about advocating, educating other people. Are you in a position to advocate for someone else? A lot of times you can be, and there's that privilege where you have power in maybe a community, you have power within your church, you have that power within your relationship with other people to advocate for others if one, they feel like they can't advocate for themselves, or they feel like it's too daunting. I implore you guys to use that privilege that you have to help individuals with disabilities or the families with family members of people with disabilities to create better environments for them, because it could just be easier for you if you have the resources to do so. You can also listen and understand, again, just having an open ear, being very open to learning new things and being open to those differences, being open to change is very important, and also allowing for everyone to feel comfortable with no fear of judgment of anything, whether it's who they are as a person or how they feel about certain things. Because again, we have no right to say that what you feel is wrong. That's just like very terrible to say if there's like, oh man, I just feel like this is just not serving me, I want there to be change. And then to say like, no, everything's fine, you just need to make it work for you, then that's, totally not okay to say. Being patient and empathetic. So again, not everyone has, in terms of communication, some people just take a little bit longer time to listen, process, and think of what they want to say back. So kind of like how you mentioned in the discussion panel is giving them that time to respond, because they want to be involved in the conversations that are being had. They don't want to be left behind. And that's what we need to provide, is that kind of patience and empathy of, we want them to be involved, so we are going to create spaces and making sure that we can provide that for them as well. And so kind of tying it all together, again, making connections, having community, and building strong communication with each other, they're all intertwined. You can't really have one without the other, but it's also important that you start with yourself. So looking at the prejudices that you have, so what are some thoughts and feelings that you have about people with disabilities? Are they positive? Are they negative? Where did they even originate from? If you've never worked with someone with a communication disorder and they're saying, oh, we want you to be with this person, like, how's that gonna, what are some of those first thoughts that you have, and think about, like, well, why do you even have those thoughts if you've never met this person before? Think about preference. Do you have a preference about who you're working with, the type of disability? Why would it matter if you're working with someone with a mental disability versus someone with a physical disability, right? They're all people, and we want to love and treat them as they should be. Perspective, again, you may not totally understand what it's like to have a disability or have a family member with a disability, and so we don't want to be biased in how we act, and we want to just be very empathetic and understanding of everyone's situation. And even if you don't understand, that's okay, because we want to be an advocate and we want to be an ally. And also any preconceptions or preconceived ideas and opinions that you have, and it could be about a program that you've started or someone that you've met, is that you can't assume that something's going to be really great or really bad without having that kind of experience or engaging with it. And then lastly, talking about within and between communities is that we want to make sure that we're fostering these positive connections within the community. So again, being accepting and empathetic and creating a safe, open space for those in the community, whether that's with your friends, the church, the family, workplace, neighborhood, but also between communities, because just because you have one community doesn't mean that you can't outreach to other communities. Again, reaching out into the schools, reaching out into other church communities, or anywhere else that could be across cultures as well. And just remember that just because something is new or different doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. So, just always having an open heart and open mind to those with disabilities, and being open to how you can better yourself in order to better the community as well. And then that is all. Thank you again so much for your time and your listening ears, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.